Hello, everybody. My name is Eli Schumann, and my topic is flipped learning in a mathematics classroom. So let's get right into it. So why did I choose this topic? Well, throughout my teacher preparation program at K-State, I came across the idea of flipped classroom several times throughout my courses. And even though we didn't go super into depth with it, it still sparked my interest because, I'm a person who uses technology a lot. And so I saw the application of this approach in potentially my future classrooms. My first few years of teaching, though, you're just trying to kind of survive. So I didn't really step outside the box and take this on, especially because I still didn't know a whole lot about it. So that's kind of what I wanted to do now that I'm in my master's and kind of learning more about it in general, is figuring out whether or not I want to adopt this in my future classrooms. So before I started researching, I knew kind of the basic structure of what flipping a classroom is, and that is kids do learn the majority of the content at home, and then in class you spend more time on practicing that content and learning more about it. But for this project, I wanted to learn more about the potential benefits, but also potential obstacles that I might encounter and how I could potentially address those. So before we talk about the benefits and obstacles, I think it's important to know exactly what flipped learning is. So there's kind of a common misconception that flipping a classroom leads to flipped learning, and they're not essentially the same thing. So in order for a classroom to truly utilize flipped learning, it needs to follow these 4 pillars that are flexible environment, learning culture, intentional content, and professional educator. So what a flexible environment means is that students can learn the content at their own pace, but also that they have access to the content in a variety of ways, really taking advantage of meeting the needs of the individual student. What the learning culture means is that in class, students are actively involved in their own learning process. As we see here in the Bloom's taxonomy graphic, at home, students are more in the understand, remember sections. And when they're in class, they're doing activities and tasks that require them to, critically think, that are more student-centered and really are, in that higher depth of knowledge scale. The third thing that needs to be followed is that the content is chosen intentionally. So that just means that the teacher, really thinks about what they're making students learn at home and what activities they're doing in class. And then the final one is professional educator, which a lot of people, when they think about flipped learning, they think it's going to be easier for the teacher, when in reality, it's actually a lot more work. Not only are teachers creating the instructional videos, but also when they're in class, we're still expected to observe and assess students, monitor their growth, and provide accommodations when needed. We're not just helping them with their homework, which is what most people see this as, and it's not. So that's kind of what flipped learning is. So I wanted to clarify that before we looked at the benefits and the potential obstacles. So here's some of the benefits. So the first benefit is that, I kind of hit on this before, is that just better teacher practices are occurring during class time. So more inquiry-based learning, more opportunities for collaborative projects, and just more, every activity should be student-centered. And that has huge impact on the way students process information and the way they learn the content. And then the next benefit is that this kind of structure provides teachers with a lot more time to work with struggling students. Since we're not spending part of the class time actually, teaching or lecturing, we have that time to see which students are struggling and to, pull those students into small groups and either review the content or just support them in the activity. And that wouldn't be the case with the traditional format. The next benefit is that content is available to parents and absent students. So since the videos are online, parents can watch the videos with their student at home. And so those parents are more able to, better support those students if they can see they're not understanding the content for themselves. And also, if a student's absent, that student can just watch the homework and come back the very next day and just, go right into it without missing a step. So those are other two benefits. And then the last benefit I found was that, for this structure to truly be the most effective, it has to be in a way that students can work at their own pace. So more of a mastery-based approach in which students, master each concept based on their ability. So what helps with this is that since the videos are online, students can watch them as many times as they need to, but they can also pause them so they can truly absorb the information. When you're teaching to a class, in class, lots of students are tuning you out because they already know the information, and lots of students are really stressed out because you might be going a little too fast for them. So this structure really provides the support to help meet the needs of your high flyers as well as those struggling students. But there are some obstacles that need to be addressed in order for this approach to really be effective. So the first one is access to technology. Now, this approach really doesn't work well if students don't have access to a computer and the internet at home. And for a lot of students, that's the case. They don't have access to that. So to kind of address this, it's important that before you adopt this policy, make sure you survey your students. Make sure you know who has technology at home and who doesn't, so that, if there are a few students who don't, and you still want to adopt this, you can find creative ways to meet the needs of those students and make sure they're getting the content even though they don't have access to the technology. The next obstacle I found was that it is difficult to hold students accountable for completing work at home. I think all teachers know that just because we assign something for students to do at home doesn't mean they're going to do it. So one creative way I found to kind of address this issue is that try to make the content interactive. So there's many different websites you can go to that help you, show the content in video form, and then throughout it have little interactive quizzes that students can take. And not only does that, keep the students engaged while they're watching the video, but it also gives you a set of data to look at to see which students are actually viewing the video, which students are struggling with the content, which will help you be more prepared for when they actually come into class, and you can pinpoint those needs of those students and then accommodate for that. The next obstacle is that a lot of people think that our generation of students have too much screen time as it is, and that this is just unneeded additional screen time. The actual creators of this approach state that, this additional screen time is productive. It's helping them learn. So the additional screen time is not actually hurting them, but some might argue that it is. And then the last obstacle that I found was that you potentially could get resistance from your administration or other community members. So since this is a fairly new approach, there's not a whole lot of data or research on the effectiveness of it. And so that might be one stance that your administration might take into not allowing you to do this in your classroom. So when I think about just how I might implement this into my future classrooms and just kind of some final thoughts, I think it has everything to do with the context in which I get my next teaching position. So for example, it depends on the grade. So I'm thinking of potentially either going back to the elementary level or going to the middle school level. And I think overall, this approach would work better at the middle school level because the kids are a little more independent. So assigning them work to do at home would probably be a little more successful, but also because in middle school, I would only be in charge of teaching one subject. So I could put all my time and effort into creating those videos and structuring this in a way that would be the most successful. While as if I go back to the elementary schools, I think I would be spread a little too thin to really implement this well. it also has to do with whatever school and district I go to. My last district had a one-to-one initiative for computers, so it would worked really well for those students. But if I go to a district that doesn't have that, then it will be a lot more difficult and a lot more obstacles to overcome if that's the case. And again, if my administration for my building's not on board with it, then potentially I cannot do this even if I thought it would work really well. But overall, I think the benefits outweigh the obstacles you have to overcome with this approach. So I would highly recommend, if you're interested in this, research it more. There's lots of resources available online. If you have any questions for me, leave them in the comments below. But thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day.